I thought, I'm never going to be pretty. I'm never going to be feminine enough. Why do I try? Why even put an effort into this? It doesn't feel right. And then I learned about the transgender community through social media. And it felt like slowly I was starting to find the answer to my own problems. Maybe I too was transgender. Maybe I too was a boy who was born in the body of a girl, and that it was my destiny to transition. I was 12 years old when I began with a social transition, and very quickly after that was when I went into the medical stages of transitioning, starting with a drug called Lupron to suppress my puberty. Very shortly after that, I was put on a weekly course of testosterone injections, very high doses that increased over the years. And I was 15 when I underwent surgery, which was the surgical removal of my breasts, and they also took skin grafts of my areolas as well, as part of the masculinization of my chest.
I've been suspended from work for 14 months now for raising concerns about gender-affirming care and the lack of evidence for gender-affirming care. I'm a child and adolescent psychiatrist in Queensland. I was working for Queensland Health for 20 years with no problems, and then the gender-affirming care model came into my workplace. And following that, we all had to pretend that children could actually change sex. And we also had to pretend that providing troubled and confused children and adolescents with hormonal interventions which have really serious long-term consequences would be of benefit to them. What we know from the research is when making decisions, adolescents will prioritise perceived short-term gains, and they'll discount any long-term harms and consequences. And that's a product of their brain development. The ability to factor in long-term consequences only comes with maturity. And so what we know is that children and adolescents have no way of understanding how important their long-term physical health is, as well as their fertility and sexual function.
The reality is this is pretty radical treatment, and we've seen a lot of evidence now coming out in other parts of the world that it is actually very experimental and very radical. The sort of things that I thought were important at 13, I certainly don't think are important now. Kids need to be protected, and that sometimes means finding other ways that aren't quite so invasive.
We were dragged into this out of the blue in late 2018. I knew nothing about transgender prior to that, and I had heard whispers of some other girls in our daughter's drama class saying that they were really boys, and I thought that was pretty peculiar. And then shortly after that, our daughter announced that she too was a boy.
So my mom and dad, when I came out to them, they were very cautious, and they actually did not want me to pursue transition, at least medically, at all. They just wanted to allow me to grow up and to learn how to cope with these feelings in the meanwhile, before possibly making any permanent decisions governing my body. But the doctors, I'd say that they were very coercive of my mom and dad. They really backed them into a corner, telling them that there was no other option for me, that I wanted to transition for a reason, that I knew what I wanted, and that if I were denied it, it could kill me. That my own parents would be neglecting my needs, and that my blood would be on their hands, basically. They didn't really feel like they had any other choice but to allow me to go through this, even though they never believed that I was a boy. They never truly believed that I was their son. They just wanted me to get better. And they made do with the only options that they were given by the medical professionals.
This is a nightmare situation for parents who need to figure out how to stay close to their child whilst protecting their child from the harms of medicalisation. Often they can't speak openly about their opposition to medicalisation, and there have been shocking cases in Queensland of parents who have had their child removed by child services for not going along with their transition. So unfortunately, every parent needs to have a plan in their mind about how they'll protect their child should their child develop gender dysphoria. If it was looking like my child was going to be prescribed hormonal treatments, that would be over my dead body. Or the state would have to remove my child, which has happened in Australia.
We're seeing the rise of, the intrusion of government into families and, children's lives every day, and it's not just this issue. I think the left of politics love to get their hands on kids early because they're easy to shape, and so I think we are seeing incursions into family life. The various conversion therapy bills all around the country are a good example of that. In all of those legislative frameworks, I believe it is easier to talk about the transition than it is someone to talk them out of a transition, and to have criminal sanctions on that sort of behaviour is incredible in my view. And I really didn't think we'd get to that point in this country at any point.
I transitioned when I was 22 years old and detransitioned when I was 28. It didn't work. It doesn't turn you into a man. Anyone claiming that the gender transition will convert you into the opposite sex is lying. The problem is a lot of these people are autistic, they're bipolar, borderline personality disorder, all people with very difficult relationships with identity and identity permanence. And somehow they all ignore this. And so I went to another GP who was happy to write me a referral, went to the psychiatrist, and he basically in the letter says, well, she's likely to detransition, but let her do it anyway.
The doctors were supporting what she was saying, that she needed to take testosterone and needed to have her breast cut off, and because the school was supporting her new name and new pronouns, we were seen as the outlier, the enemy, the one people who wouldn't support this new identity, and so our relationship just disintegrated almost overnight.
Just after my second year of high school was when my breasts were removed. And the regret came just a few months afterward. It was clear to me that I lost a part of myself, a part of my identity, forever. But this is something that I found so difficult to come to terms with, because I genuinely believed that somehow I was a boy, that I was going to become a man, that it wasn't something I would be able to escape. I felt like I was too deep in. I looked like a boy, I sounded like a boy. I didn't think there was any return, or that there would be any point in trying. But as time went on, more and more, I came to realize that it was destroying me, every single part of this. Years of my life, years of my developmental years were now lost.
I would have thought in life conservative approaches to medicine are the best, and I would like to see more focus on what the cause of the original dysphoria is. And we've seen incredible increases across the country and interesting disparities between states as well. In Victoria, for example, the rates seem to have increased more rapidly, whereas here in South Australia, not so much. But I would really hope that we would see more focus on the causes rather than the treatment at this point.
But no one wanted to explore the why. That's all I wanted. But no, it was me going to my doctors and saying, how do I deal with these feelings? It means you're transgender. Well, then you must medicalize yourself. I went there asking for help, and they gave me mutilation.
Whilst on puberty blockers, children will suffer side effects similar to the menopause, so weight gain, hot flushes, fatigue and mood swings. There's suspected impact on cognitive development because adolescence is such an important time for brain growth.